Hello guys, welcome to drilling-academy.com. Today I would like to present you a very hot topic in the drilling industry nowadays, which is managed pressure drilling and one of its very famous variant, PMCD, which stands for Pressurized Mudcap Drilling. This is the video that will provide you the insight of engineering basis and operational experience and highlights. Let's start. The first question is, where is PMCD good for? As we all know that when we drill, we will in some region encounter error, when we drill into fracture, we may encounter severe loss circulation or total loss circulation. So PMCD is quite a very good candidate for those situations where losses are too expensive to deal with, where LCMs and cement squeeze are ineffective, time and or cost consuming. This diagram over here shows you a general view of major components of a PMCD operation. Basically, what you will have is first the rotating control head, or another name is rotating control device, and it also has a casing pressure gauge on the side outlet, and it has together with it is the flow spool with the side outlet gate valves assemblies and the annular injection line. And the next component of the PMCD operation is the sacrificial fluid that we pump downstream. In short, let's call it sac fluid. And the next component is the annular mudcap fluid, or another name that many people prefer using it is light annular mud, LAM. This is a mud that we use as a mud cap on top of the fracture, and we use it to keep the annulus full. So basically, there are three major components. First is the rotating control device, second is the sac fluid, and third is the LAM fluid in the annulus. And what is really happening downhole in a PMCD operation with mudcap fluid, with sac fluid, and even with formation fluid is being expelled into the wellbore. So basically, there are four downhole zones that we will say in a PMCD operation. We have zone number 1 is the fluid zone, and zone number 2 is the mixture zone. Zone number 3 is the interface zone, and zone number 4 is the interaction zone. So what are they? Let's take a look inside. First is the fluid zone, number 1. This is the mudcap fluid in the annulus. This yellow part here is the zone, we call it fluid zone. And second is the mixture zone, number 2. This is the mixture of the mudcap fluid, the sac fluid, the drill cuttings, all mixed together in this zone here. And the third zone is the interface zone. This is the imaginary boundary of the mudcap and the mixture zone. Look at this red line. This is the imaginary boundary between the mudcap, the yellow part, and the orange part is the mixture zone. And the fourth zone is the interaction zone. This is the part of the formation that interacts with the well fluid via intake or expulsion. Mostly it takes the sac fluid, the cuttings, and the formation fluid from the other zones below based on the pressure regime equilibrium mechanism. Now let's discuss the principles of a PMCD operation. The PMCD operation doesn't start straight away when you go into drilling a new session. But first, you always start drilling in conventional mode. The well bore is overbalanced statically, and hence, dynamically, it is overbalanced too. I believe you know that. We continue drilling conventionally until we encounter losses. And we deal with losses by varying flow rate, density. We record all kind of static loss rate, dynamic loss rate, and then we need to pump LCM if we have to perform a cement squeeze job if we have to, and if our operation allows us to do so in terms of effectiveness, time, and cost. And key important thing here is also we need to estimate the fracture gradient at the top of the fracture right? The top of the first fracture. This is the first fracture, and this is the top of it. This is where we care about, the fracture gradient on top of the first fracture. I believe you understand why we care about this first fracture and why I will not care much about the subsequent fractures if there might be along the drilling course. And now remember, fracture gradient is the list of ECD or ESD which causes losses. And I also believe you already understood what ESD and what ECD are. Among these questions in here, then if you need me to explain further, please drop me a note. So as we said, we start our drilling in conventional mode, which is we don't use RCD bearing installed, no RCD installation in here. So this one in here, the RCD housing is here, but the bearing is not in place, and hence the choke pressure gauge is showing 0 psi. And the next step is to determine the light annular mud density, the LAM density. It is crucial to determine the suitable density of the LAM. We need to examine various cases. Case number 1 is if we are having static losses in the well. So what we should do is we shut down the mud pump, we keep the strings rotation about 30 RPM, and we keep it off bottom. You all know why, right? And now we start filling up the annulus with seawater until the hose stop taking fluid. All right. We record the volume of the seawater that has been pumped into the well, and we work out from the volume and from the annulus capacity. We work out the height of the seawater column in the annulus, and then from there we work out the hydrostatic pressure of the seawater column in the annulus. And together with the TVD at the last zone here, now we can work back out the fracture gradient in here. This will help us determine the LAM density to be kept above the fracture. And we don't want this LAM to be lost into the fracture. We want it to be floating on top of the fracture. All right, case number 2 is if we have dynamic losses in the well. Then we have to work on the ECD from the highest flow rate that does not cause losses anymore. There are formulas to work out ECD from flow rate, from the mud density, and other mud rheologies. So if you need them, please drop me an email. I'll get them back to you in person then. Right? So upon determining this ECD, we will be able to determine the maximum density of the LAM that does not create a loss over the fracture. And now we are ready to proceed to PMCD operation. Right, we go ahead, we mix the LAM mud in the stack room and then pump it into the annulus of the well, fill up with that, record the volume, of course. And then we go ahead, we install the RCD bearing. In this picture here, we see the RCD bearing is installed, is in place. And then you conduct the other drills, all the drills as deemed necessary before drilling. And remember, at this stage, inside the drill string, it is still the mud that we were using for drilling before. And hence, the choke pressure gauge still shows 0 psi here. A couple of important notes for you when you design the BHA for PMCD operation. A recommendation is BHA needs to have a flow bypass sub to be installed above the MWD and LWD tools. It will help you pump the LCM out of the LWD and MWD tools without damaging any LWD or MWD tools. And another recommendation is BHA needs to have about 2 to 3 float subs in the BHA to back up for each other. If one float sub fails or one float valve fails, you still have another one to back up for it. So please try to avoid running only with one BHA, one float valve in the BHA. But if you do so, for whatever reason, I don't know, then you should think about equipping each drilling stands that you plan for drilling in the PMCD interval, an FOSV, full opening safety valve. We will come to this point later in the session where we discuss the issues in drilling in PMCD mode. Now let's come back to the principles of PMCD operation. Now we're going to drill under balance. PMCD is drilling the well with under balance. It means that the hydrostatic pressure of the annular of the wellbore fluid, and also including the ECD, equivalent mud weight, and equivalent pressure, the bottom pressure here will be under balance against the formation pore pressure. Outside here is the formation pore pressure. This formation pore pressure is overbalanced against the wellbore fluid. And this differential pressure between pore pressure and wellbore fluid will be registered on this choke pressure gauge here. The common practice is to engineer the fluid, the fluid density, so that we have around 100 to 200 psi showing on this choke pressure gauge. And the principle of all variants of managed pressure drilling, of course including the PMCD, is that the bottom hole pressure equates the hydrostatic pressure of the wellbore fluid plus the choke pressure gauge here. In other application of managed pressure drilling, the choke pressure gauge is what we intentionally impose on surface. But in PMCD, this choke pressure value here is what imposed by the pore pressure of the formation. And because we're going to drill with losses, we will not have return at surface. Therefore, we will pump down the sack fluid. As we said before, the sack fluid will be pumped down in the drill string. And as the name is self-explanatory, it is sacrificial, means it will be lost into the fractures. Therefore, we'll use either seawater or brine to save costs. And because the density of the seawater or brine is much lighter than the mud that we use, and of course lighter than the LIM density, then the wellbore fluid will create a negative overbalance, or in other words, underbalance status against the pore pressure of the formation. And that differential pressure between the wellbore fluid and the pore pressure of the formation will be shown on the choke pressure gauge. And as we said before, the formation fluid here, the formation below here might contain gas, oil, water, or whatever it has. It might have H2S or CO2, and those formation fluid will be expelled into the wellbore. And where do they go? They will be sandwiched into the fractures. So this is another great advantage of PMCD, where we don't have to deal with those unwanted formation fluids. At this stage, we should be able to see some values shown on the choke pressure gauge, and we said that's due to the differential pressure between pore pressure against the wellbore fluid pressure. However, if we still don't see any value showing on this choke pressure gauge, it's very most likely that the annulus is not full. So what we need to do now is we need to fill up the annulus with the LIM mud, and we record the volume pump, the loss rate. We keep filling up until we reach the equilibrium state, and at that state, the choke pressure here will start showing some values. Further drilling ahead in PMCD, it is crucial to implement good stockpile prevention practices. Because there is no returns at surface, we have no clue of how much cuttings are being removed from the wellbore. Therefore, we need to watch torque and drag carefully. Erratic readings are sign of hole cleaning issue. We should be pumping high-vis peel at least once or twice every stand drill. Rimming or back rimming is deemed necessary, and we need to do, if we have to remove the cuttings. And my recommendation is to take the survey before making connection to minimize chance of stock buying. and we should have another spare set of RCD bearing assemblies standby and racked back in the derrick, and having the LA mud, surplus LAM mud and Q mud ready in the reserve pits, just in case RCD is leaks. Then we have something to ready at hand to go and swap and change out. And remember, if you use FOSV on each drilling stand to drill in the PMCD interval, during the connection time, you close them. And remember to open them before going drilling. Now we need to discuss a few issues, very important issues during the course of PMCD operation. Number one and foremost is casing pressure keeps increasing and approaching high limit of the RCD. As we all know, each RCD has its upper limit of pressure holding while drilling, and while drilling we call it dynamically, and while not drilling we call it statically. So it's important. It's vital to check the datasheet and you stay on top of those numbers. And of course, we should not drill ahead when the casing pressure is approaching the dynamic limit of the RCD pressure holding capacity. All right. So if this happens, we need to investigate the following possibilities. Number one is, are we getting more underbalance in the wellbore? And number two question is, are the fractures getting plugged up? And I'll present you the hints how to find out those, how to answer those questions. Number one, while you are pumping and drilling before, and then you see casing pressure start increasing, take a look at the standpipe pressure. If it is increasing, it is something getting plugged up. And to me, it's most likely the fractures are getting plugged up, but not the bit is getting plugged up, because you are having casing pressure increasing as well. Okay, if the bit is getting plugged up, it's only the standpipe pressure increasing. I trust you know why the bit plugged up and only the standby pressure is increasing, but casing pressure has no effect. But if you need more explanation, then just drop me a note. And now you have another case is you don't have standby pressure increasing. And of course, now you have the casing pressure increasing on the amount of delta P. Then it's worth investigating. First, what we need to do is we need to stop drilling, pick up off bottom, and we need to shut in the well on the BOP and monitor shut-in drill pipe pressure and shut-in casing pressure. If at this stage we see casing pressure keeps rising and it stabilizes out at a higher value after a while, so that's definitely the sign of the well is getting more under balance. If at this stage the casing pressure starts dissipating after reaching a new height, and the fracture is getting plugged up, because the fracture is absorbing the fluid supercharge and the formation below is not charging up more pressure. So to this point, after we have examined the standpipe pressure and the casing pressure, we already have had a fairly good idea whether the well is getting more under balance or the fracture is getting plugged up. We will identify our next course of actions. I bet you knew this casing pressure increment and dissipation to determine the fracture is getting plugged up or the well is getting more under balance. However, if you need me to assist furthermore, please drop me a note. Now, case number one, if the fracture is getting plugged up, what shall we do? Before we were here, and this dotted line here, this dashed line here, we were here, and this is where we were under balance in the wellbore. And now we have this increment of delta P. This is the supercharge into the formation, into the fracture. So if we have closed the BOP before, and now we are sure that the fracture is getting plugged up, we can open up the BOP. If we didn't close the BOP before, what we can do is we continue drilling, and at the same time we start displacing the light annular mud, the LAM mud, down the drill string. We drill with control ROP and we keep the flow rate at moderate rate to let the pressure dissipate. to let the supercharged pressure dissipate. While we're drilling down and the LAM is traveling down inside the drill string, we may not be able to see a much drop and much decrement on the delta P, on the casing pressure. But once the LAM is out of the bit and start filling up in the annulus, we will see that the casing pressure starting to drop a little bit faster. And eventually, the casing pressure here will reach 0. At that time, we can stop drilling with flow check. If the well is static, we can uninstall the RCD bearing and we switch over to drilling conventionally. Now we go to conventional drilling. But if at this flow check, the well flows, we shut the well back in, we record the shut and drill pipe pressure and casing pressure, we work out a QMUT, we kill the well and resume drilling. Case number 2, if the wells is getting more under balance, right? The shut and drill pipe pressure now is the differential pressure of the formation over the sack fluid in the drill string. We can work out, sorry, something happened here. We can work out the pore pressure at the bottom hole, which is the pore pressure equals hydrostatic pressure of the sack fluid in the drill string plus the shut and drill pipe pressure. But we don't have to go that far. We should focus in bringing the choke pressure down on the amount of delta P. Bring it back now where it was before by adjusting the density of the sack fluid inside the drill string. Now, remember, we're gonna adjust the density of the sack fluid in the drill string, not the density of the LAM in the annulus. We have delta P, and this delta P is, as we said before, the increment of formation overbalance against the wellbore fluid. So we work this delta P back out to delta equivalent mud weight from the formation formula. That delta P equals the height of the fracture from the bottom hole times 0.052 times delta equivalent mud weight, and we work back out to get delta equivalent mud weight. And then the new sack density will equate the old sack density plus this delta equivalent mud weight. Then we mix the new sack fluid and pump it down into the drill string. Once it gets out of the bit, once the new sack fluid is out of the bit and start filling up on the annulus, you will see the casing pressure start dropping. I believe you understand why. But as I said before, if you need further explanation, just feel free to drop me a note. Now the next issue is if while we are drilling and we see casing pressure decreasing, then what shall we do? We need to investigate the two possibilities. Number one, are we losing the annulus head? Number two is the borehole pressure gaining overbalance against formation pore pressure. If the casing pressure drops and it is still above 0 psi, that's fine. We can keep drilling ahead in PMCD operation mode. But if the casing pressure drops down to 0 psi, we need to inject the LAM mud into the annulus via the flow spool injection line. If the hole takes fluid, it means we are having losses in the well. We record the volume of the LAM to be injected into the well to keep it full. If the loss rate is higher than the mixing rate and we can't afford it, we should consider reducing the density of the present LAM. If we inject the LAM into the annulus and the hole does not take fluid, it means now the well is gaining overbalance against the pore pressure. Now we say the well is gaining overbalance against the pore pressure, right? Just pay attention here. Before, long ago, when we were drilling, it was underbalance against the pore pressure, and now it is gaining overbalance against the pore pressure. So what we can do is we can flow check the pump across a trip tank with the trip tank pump running. If no flow shows, we can switch back to conventional drilling. If the well gains over this flow check, it means that the ECD before at the bottom hole is creating the overbalance. But now, when we shut the pump down for flow check, we lose that ECD. We only have ESD, and that ESD is not enough to create the overbalance, and we are underbalanced with the ESD. My recommendation is to continue drilling in PMCD mode for assurance. Another issue is what happens when there is a washout in the drill pipe. Let's make an example that there is a washout on the drill screen somewhere here, and this error, any error, but let's say here. What is a telltale? The telltale is that the standpipe pressure will drop gradually, and you check the surface equipment, you see, oh, good, and then you see the casing pressure start increasing. How is it? What is the connection between the casing pressure gauge here and a washout in the drill screen? I believe you understand why. And as I said before, if you need me to explain further, please drop me a note. Now let's take the action on this one. What shall we do? As I said, we should keep the hole clean, either rimming or back rimming as deemed necessary. We pump high vis, and then we start displacing LAM into the drill screen. We need to cue the well. All right, we were under balance now before, and now we need to cue the well. After we displace LAM into the drill screen and fill up the annulus here, then we flow check. If no gain, we go ahead and trip out. But if we have losses, we keep filling up the hole with LAM. But if the well flows, then we shut the well back in and we work out the cumulative weight and cue the well. And what happens if the RCD leaks? There are strip of rubbers inside the RCD, the rotating control device here. What happens if those rubbers leak? We pay more attention to the hole cleaning. We back rim as necessary. We pump high vis to clean the hole, and then we cue the well by pumping the LAM down into the drill screen until it fills up in the annulus. Then we do a flow check. And as before, similar, if no gain, we go ahead, we trip out and replace the new RCD bearing. If we have losses, we keep filling up the hole with LAM mud. If the well gains, we just shut the well back in on the BOP, work out the cumulative weight and cue the well. The process of changing our RCD bearing takes around 45 minutes if you are fast. If you are slow, it may take up to 1 hour or 1 hour and a half. So therefore, for stockpile purpose, if you are only a few stands away from the shoe, then it's safer to go back inside the shoe and then replace the RCD bearing. But if you are quite far away from the shoe, then you make sure the hole is clean by rimming or back rimming, pumping high vis, wherever you need, and then you stay off bottom about 1 stand and change out the RCD bearing. And what happens if the drill bit is getting plugged up? As we did mention before, the telltale is that we see abrupt increment in standpipe pressure, but you won't see any effect on the casing pressure, on this choke pressure gauge here. There is no increment at all. I believe you understand why. However, if you need help, just drop me a note. What can we do in this situation? We can take a few actions. Try to clear off the bit. Let's say we can vary pump rate. We can try stopping and restarting the pumps. We can try picking off bottom and vary RPM and charge the string. After all of those actions, and if we still don't succeed, we just go ahead drilling with the new standpipe pressure. What happens if float valve failed? And this is the reason why we are recommended to run 2 or 3 float valves in the BHA to avoid getting stuck, getting caught in this situation. But if we only have 1 float in the BHA and it fails holding, what we will say is that on the connection we see pressure trapped in the standpipe. Then we open the bleed up line valve to bleed off, but we see the fluid keep going out of the bleeding line. We close the valve the pressure start building back up again. So this is because of the differential pressure between the annulus versus inside of the bushing. All right, guys. So that's all the major points that I think they are necessary for you to prepare you before you go into a PMCD operation with highlights, with experience, and with the lesson learned that we've encountered. Thank you very much and see you again soon in the next video. I'm working on the next video of the managed pressure drilling with constant borehole pressure for the application of drilling with drilling in HPHT. So hopefully I can see you soon in that video. Thank you and see you. Bye bye.